Hi, welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Ryan Reza, and I'm a member of the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board, the official student group of the Institute. The Student Advisory Board is a bipartisan group whose members can access many great opportunities through their involvement with the Institute, including volunteering at programs and networking with our special guests. If you're a student and would like to join, please contact us by emailing dolesab@ku.edu or speaking with a student worker after the program. After the presentation, we will have some time for the audience to ask questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a student worker with a microphone will come to you. Please stand if you're able and just ask one brief question. If you have difficulty hearing during the program, please alert one of our student staff members or student volunteers who will assist you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Barbara Ballard.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. And good evening and welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics and the 2018 Edward F. Riley Lecture with Better Angels. I would just like to remind you in the back of your program about our discussion groups. We hope that you will think about attending them as well, the Leavenworth series. And remember, this is our civic engagement and KU Leadership Activity Week. And actually it's more than a week. It goes from September 30th until October the 19th, and we're in the middle of voter registration. So we're trying to do our civic duty here. I will go on with our program by saying, before introducing tonight's guest, we would like to recognize the gift that made this newly endowed lecture series possible. Edward F. Riley Jr. is a distinguished KU alumnus who served 29 years in the Kansas House of Representatives and later the Kansas Senate. He is also the former chairman of the U.S. Parole Commission. Ed currently resides in Bethesda, Maryland, and enjoys frequent visits to his hometown of Leavenworth, Kansas. His gift to the Institute has established the Edward F. Riley Lecture, a public program exploring the role of civil discourse and bipartisanship in contemporary politics. He is with us tonight. Ed, would you please stand and be recognized? Tonight's interview will be conducted by Dole Institute Director Bill Lacey. Tonight's guest serves the nonpartisan, nonprofit Better Angels as a regional coordinator and is a member of the organization's senior leadership team. Better Angels is a national organization with the mission of healing political divides in our nation through community-based alliances, workshops, and constructive debate. I know you will enjoy this evening's program. It's a program that I think we all know we need in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rob Robertson. I turn the program over to Bill Lacey.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you all for coming out for this inaugural event. We're really pleased and delighted to have Rob here with us. Rob, welcome to the Dole Institute.
Well, thank you very much.
Let's start with a little bit of personal information so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. Tell us about your upbringing and education.
I was brought up in a suburb north of Cincinnati, Ohio, called Woodlawn. I lived there for all of my young years. I left Cincinnati area to attend Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York, and stayed in New York State for around 20 years after that. And around 2000, moved to Amherst, Massachusetts, fondly known as the People's Republic of Amherst, Massachusetts.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I found very interesting when you and I first talked is you have a full-time job, and yet yet you make the time to be involved in Better Angels and I think you do a fair amount of travel and do workshops and things like that. So how is it that you're able to do that? You have a full-time job and yet you still make the time to do this. Why?
I think this is really important work. Personally, for me, this work gives me hope that we may come to live in a country that isn't terribly divided. So I look at the news, and having gotten rid of TV, I no longer look at the news, but I'm keenly aware of the difficulties that we face talking across this divide, working to help people find a way to talk with one another gives me great satisfaction and great hope. And so I probably spend 20, 25 hours a week on Better Angels volunteer work in addition to a full-time job.
Wow, wow, that's a major commitment.
Well, if you don't have a life outside of it, you can swing it.
Yeah, okay. Tell us a little bit about the background of Better Angels, how it got started, who started, the people involved in it, a little bit of history, and kind of specifically what the mission is.
Better Angels got started right after the election in 2016. David Blankenhorn, then the president of the Institute for American Values, a somewhat right-leaning organization, and David Lapp, a person who was employed by the IAV, had some opinions about where our country was prior to the election, as did all of us, I think. And I think we might have had the same thing in mind. And after the election, Blankenhorn, who lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, a very liberal area, noticed that the streets were quiet. It was as if everyone's best friend had died. And in South Lebanon, Ohio, people were dancing in the streets. So they decided we need to do something about this. They brought 10 Reds and 10 Blues together for 2.5 days in South Lebanon, Ohio in December 2016.
Were there any fatalities from that meeting?
No blood flowed. And actually, we have some video footage from that. We're only showing you the good parts. But there's some good footage. And people apparently reached some understanding and expressed a sense of great relief at being able to speak to the other side and to speak of folks on the other side with some fondness. And so after this experience, they debriefed and they thought, well, we should just do another one. And so they did another one, and after that one, they said, well, what should we do? Well, they did another one. And then they got a bus and did a bunch more. And they went from St. Albans, Vermont, to McLean, Virginia, outside of D.C., to the Durham, North Carolina area, went over to Tennessee. And by that point, they had figured that the guy who designed the workshop, Bill Doherty, a professor at the University of Minnesota, and a active marriage counselor, which kind of stands to reason. So Bill designed the thing, and he realized that he couldn't run enough workshops throughout the United States to change the way that we interact with each other in public life. So during that bus tour, they trained about 130 moderators. And I'm one of the people who got that training. And then they decided that Bill didn't really have enough time to drive around the country on a bus training moderators, so we rolled out moderator training. And now people can go online and become trained as a RedBlue Workshop moderator. So we started with this RedBlue Workshop, 2.5 days of exercises to help people listen to and learn from each other and express their thoughts and views to one another respectfully. And people were transformed. They said that they no longer felt that everybody on the other side had the exact same opinion. It wasn't a monolith of evil on the other side. And they'd met folks and sat with them and enjoyed a meal with them and got to hear about their kids and their jobs and what they thought was important. And so they realized that these people had good intentions, that they cared about our country and were committed to doing good for our country. We had a difference of opinion between the sides on how to go about that, but that connection is clear. It amazes me that people leave our workshops saying, and we're not that far apart. Now, I think we are kind of far apart. But I think the reason people say that is because they've had this deeply emotional experience, and the not far apartness they're talking about is connecting as human beings. And if you connect as human beings, then you have a chance to connect on policy issues on which you may disagree. So now, I'll keep going on.
Please do.
Bill said, please don't give me short answers. I can oblige. So now we have the RedBlue Workshop. It comes in a 3-hour version and a 6-hour version, which with lunch is 7 hours. With early arrival and you having to chase them out of the building with a broom comes to about 8 hours. And then we want to go out to dinner afterwards. So it's a long day. We also offer a skills workshop, which is a lecture role play 2.5-hour program which teaches people how to get the best out of their Thanksgiving visit this year. And we also are rolling out Better Angels debates. And I've been asked to take on national leadership for that. So that's really all I want to talk about now, Better
Okay.
Angels debates.
Okay. Well, let's stick with the workshops for a moment, and then we'll go to the debates. But describe in some depth how the workshop is organized. And, as you know, we're talking about doing one here in Lawrence sometime in the future. And describe how that's organized, how it's set up, how you get people to the point where I would imagine they come in and they're kind of wary of the other
You could
side,
say
but they
that, yeah.
leave as friends in
Yeah.
most cases, apparently.
So the organizational part of it, the way we've been doing it is people are called to this work, and they're either red or they're blue. And we tell them, we're delighted that you want to be an organizer. And now your job is to find an organizing partner from the other side. So that can take some time for people to think about the friends they no longer have who are on the other side. Who can I call about this? And, folks go to Republican and Democratic committee chairs and gun shops and indivisible Facebook groups to try to find an organizing partner. So now you have two people who have said, we're going to work together to bring a workshop into being. Then we make them find a venue. And it has to be free unless they're reaching into their pocket to pay for it. So typically that's churches and civic organizations. So now they've got 2 organizers and a venue and a couple of dates. They look to us to get 2 moderators confirmed for one of those dates. And now they have a firmed up date and time and town location. Now we ask those folks to go forth and recruit 6 reds and 6 blues. And we want the reds to recruit reds and the blues to recruit blues. It's our experience that reds have a little more credibility with reds than blues do, and vice versa. So if you're a blue recruiting for your workshop and you run across a red who's interested, you pass that person's name to your organizing partner. We ask these people a couple of questions. We want to know that they can be present for the entire day. We don't want them flitting in and out like Tinkerbell. It's a full commitment. So they say, yeah, I can be there for the whole day, and yes, I'm red, or yes, I'm blue. And a lot of people say, well, I'm purple. Is there a place for me? And we say no. But you may be a blue or a red masquerading as a purple. So we try to get to the bottom of that. And the test for this is, are your values and beliefs generally conservative? And looking over your voting history, do you tend to vote mostly for Republicans? And if you answer yes, you're red. And the same for blues. So we ask our organizers to ask the potential participants, are you interested in hearing from the other side? And are you willing to engage in respectful conversation? Those are the only standards. So whoever comes having said yes to those questions is who we get in that workshop. So we also want observers, and there may be a true purple or maybe a libertarian who doesn't hold with either side particularly, and we have a space in our workshop for observers as well. 7 reds, 7 blues, 15 observers. And people ask, well, why that number? I don't know. It's about even. I mean, you don't want the participants to feel as though there's a sea of people in the amphitheater seating section watching their every move. So you don't want to overwhelm the participants with observers. But we do want observers. For one thing, it's going to be hard to change the country 14 people at a time. And we think with 29 people at a time, we'll do it in half the time. The other reason is there may be people who don't want their political position revealed. I live in a very blue part of a blue state. And there might be a person who doesn't want folks in the community to know they're conservative because they're in business and they don't want their business to suffer, because liberals have been a little critical of conservative business people and have voted with their wallets, and nobody wants that to happen to their business. I've had people tell me, I'm so angry at the other side. I couldn't possibly sit down and engage with them for an entire day. I couldn't do it, but I want to watch. And I've had people say, I don't feel capable of articulating my beliefs adequately to represent how I feel to people. So observers may be any number of different people. They might also be folks who are from 3 towns over who are thinking about moderating a workshop. And they want to see one before they do one, which I think is wise. So that's the deal on participants and observers. Now, in acting as a coordinator, my goal, my job is to try to guide people in this process. So, okay, you're an organizing pair. Here's what we found is the smoothest path to getting a workshop going. And while these workshops are wonderful things, I don't start this organizing process with the goal of achieving a workshop in mind. What I want is the reds and blues who stick around after that workshop to form a red-blue alliance to continue to meet in their community and interact with each other in the way that they've just learned, relearned, remembered how they can do. So these red-blue alliances run more workshops, dig deeper into the substantive issues that are separating reds and blues. They start to change the tone of their community just by existing and talking to one another and being active in their community and offering more workshops. And that, we think, is how we're going to change the way that we conduct our political life in the United States. We have to start at the grassroots.
Would you say, Rob, that, excuse me, would you say that people come into these workshops and they start out being fairly partisan, but that once they get away from kind of their partisan talking points, that's when there starts to be a little bonding?
No, I would not say that.
Okay.
So you'd expect that, right? But what happens is people come in and we tell them, be there at 9:45, we're starting at 10. And so they come in and you can tell that they are wondering whether it was a good idea to come here today. So there's I don't know if, there's definitely an undercurrent in the room of what have I let myself in for? So we have a big rectangular table, typically 4 3x6 or 3x8 tables. So, it's 4 tables, 2 and 2. And they sit around the table, red, blue, red, blue. We've got tent cards up so they know where they're sitting. And it's pretty subdued when they come in. Folks aren't laughing and joking. We start the day very simply. We say, okay, let's get started, and we start. So we don't tell people what they're going to experience because that's going to flavor what they experience. And we do a few things at the beginning. we go around the room with introductions, and we ask people to say their name and where they live and whether they're red or blue and why they're here today. And so that goes around the room, and then the moderators do the same. And then we go over the ground rules. And it's really clear, once you've heard the ground rules, that we're really not going to be entertaining partisan talking points. So we tell people that they're speaking only for themselves. They're not representing any particular side or position. And the approach really seems to open people up to being willing to say how they feel about stuff. Now, the other thing to remember is this is a pre-selected group. These are people who have said, I'm interested in listening to the other side. So, here's your population, and now here's the pool you're pulling from. And they also say they're willing to engage in respectful conversation. But we all come to this with our bad habits. And that's why the moderators are there, to help them get back on track when they get off topic. We start with an exercise that helps us think about the stereotypes in which we see each other. And it's an interesting approach because we ask the reds and blues to separate, and we ask each group to identify all of the stereotypes they can think of that the other group has of them. So if I'm a conservative, I might say gun-toting maniac, or any number of things. And all you have to do is listen to the news or watch Facebook for a little bit, and you'll see those stereotypes. So people list between 10 and 20 stereotypes, and then we ask the group to vote on what they consider to be the top 5, their 5 favorites. And then we take those 5 stereotypes and we look at each one of them in turn. We want to know, with respect to this particular stereotype, what is false, misleading, or terribly exaggerated about it, and what is true instead. And then we really want to know, what's the kernel of truth in this stereotype? What about this stereotype is accurate? And so each group does this, and then we all come back together. One person from each group presents to the reassembled group. And so the benefit of this is that the blues get to hear a bit about how the reds perceive themselves as being criticized, and the reds get to tell the blues where that criticism is kind of right. And the blues get to do the same for the reds, to say, well, we are a little bit shrill, aren't we? And that is remarkable to see what people come up with. After the group secretaries report back, we ask folks to talk about, what did you learn about the other side, and do you have anything in common? And if a speaker has a particular point they'd like to make that is not in line with those 2 questions, we redirect them and bring them back. And then it's time for lunch, because after about 2 hours, we've had enough for the time being. So for an hour, we ask folks to join each other and sit and eat together. We don't want to see a red table and a blue table, and we let them know that. And then we go around and just make sure that folks are mingling. After lunch, we do another exercise that is called a fishbowl. And you have 2 concentric circles of chairs, and in the inner circle is the group that's talking, and in the outer circle is the group that's listening, and in the outer darkness are the observers who have been told they must remain mute. So the group in the middle is asked, what about your policies and values is good for America? Why is your deal good? And then after about 12 minutes, we ask them, do you have any reservations about your side and your policies and values? So again, it's what we like about ourselves and an opportunity for self-criticism. And then the folks in the inner circle move to the outer circle. The ones who are listening now speak. The work in this exercise is done by the people who are listening. and not by the people who are speaking. And then we go back to the big table and we ask the same question. Did you learn anything about the other side, and do you have anything in common? And people apparently have learned things, and they see that they have things in common, and it comes out. Then we have a really interesting exercise, questions of curiosity. So we split the reds and the blues, and we ask each group to come up with 4 questions. What do you really want to know about the other side? So it has to be something you don't already know, or you've wasted a question. And it can't be a gotcha question. It can't be a question that is intended to demonstrate to the other side the error of their ways, the contradiction in their positions, or that they're total dolts. We don't permit that kind of stuff. So we work with whatever question they bring up, and we come up with some questions that they then are able to ask folks in the other side. This can be really interesting because we've worked with people for the first question, and now every member of the blue and every member of the red group have a list of the questions they came up with. But after they've asked their questions and they've heard an answer, they can then ask a follow-up question, and we haven't had the chance to work with them on that. So you've got to be attentive to see that folks are not slipping in a gotcha question, because they did bring their bad habits when they came to the workshop. So we take these groups of reds and blues and we split them each in half, and we send one half over to the other half. So now we have 2 small groups of reds and blues. We do not have critical mass. And each of these groups ask each other these questions. So the questions can be very interesting. I moderated a workshop in Malden, Massachusetts last weekend, and one of the questions was, what did you think of the testimony offered by Dr. Blasey Ford and Judge Kavanaugh? So that's about as open-ended and volatile a question as you could possibly think of. And so that was a blue question for the Reds, and each of the Reds addressed that in their own way. And it's remarkable to see the stuff that people come up with. It really is a treat to have the opportunity to sit with them and help them do this. So now I get to tell them the heavy lifting's over. We're coasting for the rest of the workshop. We have a little break, and then we do an exercise which contemplates the actions we can take as individuals, the actions that we can take with the people on our own side, and what we can do with the people on our own side and the people on the other side. So we ask folks to work on that individually for a little while. We give them a grid and a pen, and they're hard at work. And then we ask them to turn to the person next to them, who is if they're red, the person next to them is blue, and we ask them to discuss what they've come up with, and then we ask for folks to share around the table. Then we do evaluation and a feedback form. We want to know what didn't work for people. If there's some part of this workshop that doesn't work for folks, we want to know, because we want to correct it and improve it. The criticism that I hear is we didn't dig deep enough. And that's right, we didn't dig deep enough. So we want these people to form a RedBlue Workshop, a RedBlue Alliance. We want them to make a commitment to continue to meet with each other and work together. And that's a place where you can dig deeper into the differences between liberals and conservatives' values and positions. So I guess we leave them wanting more. I think the benefit of the workshop is folks realize that the people on the other side are not as described on Facebook. They're people who have good intentions. They're honest, sincere, caring individuals. They care about our country and they care about their neighbors. And that connection is critical. Trust is established. When you have some trust, you can build relationships, which leads to more trust. And that leads to a situation where if somebody says something really unskillful, rather than reacting, the person to whom it was addressed might just wait for a moment for that person to hear what they said and make a correction in their approach. So you get some credit established when you have a relationship, and people are willing to hang in there through a difficult conversation because of the relationship. Then we have to chase them out with a broom.
Tell us, you mentioned a few minutes ago, you mentioned the debates that you're starting and how that's kind of one of your pet projects, my language, not yours, but how do they work and what's the purpose?
How much time do you have?
We're good.
All right. I told him he'll need the hook. So Better Angels debates were developed by one of our board members, April Lawson, who, I don't know why, she loves debates. And apparently there is a subculture of people who love debates. Who knew about this? So she debated in college. Her friends get together for debates. I don't understand it. So she brought Better Angel debates to our national convention, our founding convention in June in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And I had the opportunity to observe one of these debates. And at our convention, Reds wore a red lanyard with a name tag, and Blues wore a blue lanyard with a name tag. And so you knew who folks were. And so we're all in this room, and the resolution we were debating was resolved that law enforcement in the United States should protect all lives equally. So this is a Black Lives Matter resolution, and it's a tender topic for people on both sides. So we talk a little bit at the beginning about the culture of these debates. So again, we're listening with respect, we're speaking with respect. The parliamentary procedure that we use, which I find terribly alien to me, because when you say something, I'm already planning what I'm going to say, and I'm going to blurt it out. And you can't do that with parliamentary procedure. And it works really well to slow the flow of conversation, which means there's less reactivity. The conversation becomes a little less volatile if it gets to a difficult point. It's less volatile because it's moving more slowly. It's deliberate and maybe even a little bit ponderous. And if you speak and I'd like to ask you a question, I have to raise my hand. I'm recognized. I rise to my feet and I say, Madam Chairman, I have a question for the speaker. And I'm asked to ask my question, and I address the chairwoman to address my question. So the speaker said this, and I wonder, what is the speaker's opinion as to that? And then I sit down and the speaker answers, and the speaker is thanked, and they resume their seat, and another speaker is asked to come up. So I watched people. There are a few more things about culture. For those of us who suffered through debates in high school, an exquisite torture. Here you are. You have to advocate a position in which you don't believe, and you have to do it in front of your peers, which is horror in and of itself. And so there you are, you're stuck. And Better Angels debates are not like that. We want people to speak from their heart. We want to know what they believe in. They may have a position that they can defend perfectly, but if they don't believe it, it has no place. So we welcome nuance, we welcome ambiguity, we welcome it if somebody says, you know, I really don't know whether I'm for or against it, but here's what I'm thinking. And that's what we want to know. We want to know what the thinking is, because we believe as a group we can synthesize a better understanding of an issue with all of us together, pro, con, or anywhere in between. So we encourage people who are terrified of speaking to give it a try. And then the chair has to work with the group with a pretty gentle hand to kind of help the process through. Now, I speak with great knowledge and understanding. I haven't chaired one of these yet. I'm a little anxious. I have to figure out how to do it by October 22nd because we're doing it. So we'll see how that goes. So now you have 4 speakers who speak for 4 minutes, pro, con, 4 speakers who speak for 3 minutes, pro, con, 4 for 2 minutes. Each of these speakers, we may have from 1 to 3 questions from the floor. And at the end of it, hopefully we have a social event afterwards where people can enjoy something to eat and drink and hang out together and continue the conversation. The intention is to allow folks to hear what other people are thinking, to allow ourselves to be touched by the ideas of others, perhaps have our feelings and opinions changed by the ideas of others, to arrive at a better understanding of the issue under discussion and to build a deeper community. So I watched one of these where we were all labeled red or blue, and it was an issue that people have sharp opinions on. And if we had not been wearing liberal and conservative labels, I don't know that I would have been able to tell which side 80% of the people who spoke were on. Some it was clear, most it was not. So it was remarkable, the range of views across the spectrum of people who say they're conservative or who say they're liberal. So the key to having a good debate is in identifying a resolution, a thing to discuss, that will likely split the group evenly. It's not much of a debate if everybody's for it or against it. So you can talk about the topic, but you're not going to have opposing ideas come together. So a good deal of work goes into planning the resolution itself. And the other half of a successful debate is in the quality of the speeches and the questions and the ability of the chair to keep things moving with a sense of humor, a light hand, and a high energy level.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about this. You and your colleagues are doing these workshops, presumably in a lot of places around the country. How does this inform your views and your colleagues' views on how we got to where we are today in terms of the terrible division in this country?
Some people want to talk about how we got here, and usually when we talk about how we got here, we're assessing responsibility, and one side bears more responsibility to our way of thinking than the other side. And I'm really not interested in having that conversation. While it may be relevant, it's not relevant to me, because I want to bring people together to have the opportunity to take responsibility for doing the work that's going to heal our nation. And to me, figuring out how we got here is not part of that work. It's a hard thing to, so my wife has a very set opinion on this, and I tell her, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's more at fault, Nobody's free of blame here. And I think, people have gotten really exercised around the last few years, but I think the problem goes back 25 years or more. So if we're going to build a better way to interact with each other in a political environment, we've got a lot of work to do, and casting ashes on the other guy isn't going to help. I slipped that one nicely, did I?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. You have a lot of individuals here tonight who wanted to hear what you had to say, what would you say to them about the importance of getting involved in this effort, whether it's Better Angels or another way, to try to, bring people together more?
So people are interested in this for a number of different reasons. And the reason I'm interested in this is that where we are as a country just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that we can't listen to one another and that we're calling each other names. And, we've not been able to do business in our national government for some time, and people are suffering as a result of that. Our country's suffering as a result. I don't know. I think, maybe we'll have an opportunity tonight to hear why people might be interested in this kind of thing. My point of view as somebody who wants to organize to do this work is that I'm interested in interacting with people who want to do the work. I'm not interested in interacting with people who want to debate about how the work ought to be done. So I'm a big fan of Yoda, do or do not, there is no try. So that's kind of how I feel about it. When I interact with people who contact me as a result of the emails that I send them and the automatic stuff that we send out, it's clear that people feel the pain of living in a country that's full of vitriol and rancor. So people feel this. It is, I think, a sense of dis-ease. We are ill at ease. And, it's as if we know we're sick, but we're not quite sure what to do about it. So the thing that Better Angels offers that I just love is we've got a plan. Here's this RedBlue Workshop, and here's what it does. And it requires modest facilitation skills to be a moderator, and you can get trained up in about 15 hours once we approve you to take the online training. And it takes modest really all you have to do as an organizer is browbeat everyone you know and everyone you don't know, and harass people in the line at the grocery store. My wife is embarrassed every time she's out with me. I'm doing something wrong. So that's what I want to do. I want to work with folks who are interested in doing this work. We had a workshop in Malden last Saturday, and it felt like we weren't getting anywhere in terms of filling it up with participants. And you have suffered under that yoke yourself, because it was a hard job to get seven red and 7 blue students to commit for tomorrow. So I put some stuff out on Facebook, and there was a guy who wanted to argue about our process, and we really should invite purples, and on and on. And we could still be interacting on Facebook had I not just said, well, I think I have to block this guy and move on to get the job done. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, Bill. Mm-hmm. All right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very definitely. I have one final question, then we'll open it up to your questions from the audience. So be thinking about a question, and remember, keep your questions brief and to the point.
Yeah,
and please don't make statements. This is an opportunity for everybody, as many people as who want to ask questions. But Rob, let me ask a practical question. If people want to get involved with Better Angels, if they're inspired tonight to do something locally or regionally here in this area, what do they need to do?
So go to better-angels.org. better-angels.org. Join our email list. Heck, become a member. $10 a year. It probably won't break you. You become a member of our email list, you automatically get an email from us that asks you to become an organizer. So you can become an organizer. You can interact with the person who sent you that email, I think it's still me, and say, I think I might want to be a moderator, and I'll send you some information on that. So we need organizers, people to do the work of bringing reds and blues together. We need moderators who will facilitate those workshops. We need 2 per workshop. We are going to be needing lots and lots and lots of debate chairs. And we're going to be offering online training for them probably toward the end of October. If you think this is a problem in our country, start talking with your friends. Have conversations with people. Ask them how they feel about this. Ask them if they think they might want to do something about this. Get people fired up and ready to do some work. I'll tell you, this is the only thing that I see in my life now that gives me hope that one day we might have a country that works together again. So that's why I'm doing it. better-angels.org.
Okay, very good. And if you're interested in participating in one of these programs here in Lawrence, you can email them, or you can email the Dole Institute and say, hey, bring Rob or some of his folks back, and we'll try to organize something here. We're actually talking seriously about organizing something on campus in the foreseeable future. Okay, we're going to open it up to your questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Please wait for one of our students with a microphone before you ask the question. That gentleman did it exceptionally well. He held up his arm and he held it up so they could see. So everybody please do that. Yes, sir.
Do you find that more blues or more reds are interested in participating in this process?
At this point, it seems as though more blues are interested in becoming subscribers and members. It's probably about an 80-20 split. And part of the reason seems to be that Reds may feel a little bit suspicious about dialogue, which is a blue word, workshops, which is a blue word, and where I am, a blue in a blue state, Reds have been getting hammered every time they stick their head up above the line of the foxhole. So they seem to think that they are going to be publicly chastised or ridiculed for having conservative views. They see people around that who've had that experience, and they're not anxious to repeat it. What we do is we have some articles that were written by people, conservatives for conservative publications, and we offer them those articles for a conservative view of workshops. And we also give them the agenda and ground rules, and that shows very clearly what the expected behavior is for the day. At our board, we're equally red and blue. Senior staff, equally red and blue. Our leadership team is equally red and blue. We hope one day that our volunteers, subscribers, and members will also be equally red and blue. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Just answered the question. The idea is intriguing, but having been a part of other opportunities like that, it seems as if there are always people waiting to hijack the process during the process. And I wonder how you try to ensure that there's a certain generosity of spirit in the conversation, as opposed to, I'm going to use this opportunity to make sure I can sway the people in this room.
So we tell people very clearly that no one will persuade anyone of anything during this day. If people try to preach, we shut them down. We shut them down as many times as we need to shut them down. So I was in a really difficult workshop, and I don't know, 6, 7 times I redirected this person's conversation. And at the end, he snuck it in anyway. So, you know, sometimes it can't be helped. Those words, generosity of spirit, have been used in a workshop. Somebody was just having a really tough time, and the moderator invited them to develop generosity of spirit. And it was as if somebody flipped a switch. behavior changed, I'm told. So I remember those words for use when I need them.
Okay, next question.
Hi, actually, my question is for Mr. Riley, who served for so many years in the Kansas House and Senate, and to get his response to what was it like then when he was in the Kansas as a legislator. Was it more still partisan like it is now? Was there more bipartisan work done there? I just am curious a little bit about his response to where we are now and what it was like then.
Well, I'm happy to respond. It was a different world, one that I don't even recognize. You know, the Kansas legislature was, as everyone knows, 2-to-1 or better Republican dominated. And there was a time in period of Kansas history when there was only one Democrat in the Senate, and he filed a minority report on behalf of the minority party. But I have to say, I've been away now 25 years in Washington, and when I left in 1992, things were still in really great shape in terms of the ability to work together with our counterparts in the Senate and in the House. And I know that if we got into a big debate tonight, that everybody would have their thought and idea about what led to the change. I'm not going to get into that tonight. Thank you. We could all have a different idea. But it slipped, and it slipped very significantly. So all I will tell you is that many, many of the things we accomplished as members of the legislature, some of my best friends in the legislature, we would debate the issues, and I had some of the most difficult in my committee, everything from capital punishment to equal rights for the ladies to the abortion issue to right to life to parimutuel gambling. All of those things came to my committee. But yet we had very tough debates over the issue, and yet we all got along, went out in the evening, discussed what we had discussed on the floor and debated on the floor, and still left as friends. It really has, unfortunately, deteriorated. So I'm sure if Senator Dole were here tonight, he and I would probably agree on the question that I would ask Rob, and that is, when are you going to conduct your first workshop in Washington, D.C. for the United States Congress members? I hope I answered your question.
As you might imagine, I've been asked that question before. I don't think we can start there. I think that the folks in those positions are hardened. There's nothing to be done there. And I think as we work with their constituents, pressure will come up. And now we maybe can get somewhere. I'm hopeful. Thank you.
Okay, we have the next question right here. Let's do this one right here, Alex. This lady's been holding her hand up, so.
I can't see behind me. Thank you. I'm from Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, I just want to say I think it's a purple place in a way, you know. So do you believe there is a moderate, you know, because I believe there is a moderate. And that's kind of where I want to leave it. So could a moderate exist that could be a part of the discussion of an issue?
People are welcomed as participants if they lean just slightly red or just slightly blue, which, you know, here's the center mark. If you're there just off the center mark as a red or a blue, you're welcome to be a participant. And if you're at the end of the spectrum as a red or a blue, you're welcome to be a participant, provided you agree to adhere to the ground rules. I think that the nature of this thing attracts people who are moderate because we're asking folks to say, yes, I'm interested in listening to the other side and engaging in respectful conversation with them. As to, and if you're asking if a person who is truly middle of the road, half the time they vote red, half the time they vote blue, They're red on this, blue on that. They won't categorize themselves as red or blue. There is a place for that person in Better Angels, but it's not as a participant in a RedBlue workshop. They could observe a RedBlue workshop and be a full member of the RedBlue Alliance that forms after that workshop. And they can do any number of other things in Better Angels. But if the problem that we're experiencing is a problem of polarization between reds and blues, having a purple explain what a purple thinks really isn't going to be helpful in bringing these folks together to some understanding of what the other side thinks. Did I answer your question?
Well, I always like the concept. I do like debate, and I like the concept. I like debate. I'm from a family that a lot of lawyers are there, so I don't think there has to be a absolute answer to this, and that's what debate is about. So is that understandable?
We can talk after if you like. I'll leave around when they turn the lights out.
Okay, next question.
Rob, we really could have used you at our dinner clubs back prior to the last election. That would have really helped out. But my question is, I agree that these types of exercises really wouldn't work with hardened politicians, but what would happen if you had exercises with newly elected congressmen, et cetera? Could that be something that could be experimented with? Because it seems if you got started early there, that might make a difference.
We've actually had politicians approach us to ask whether they can be a part of a workshop, and we've told them yes, provided you bring one of your opposites with you, you may. And as long as you understand that you're here as a citizen and not as a representative. So we don't rule them out completely. They're not totally cast into the outer darkness. I don't know that I would want to consider working with politicians because I don't think the answer is there right now. I think that to achieve political office, you have to have considerable funding. And to get that funding, you have to have certain positions. Folks who are investing in you have to believe that you're going to be a return on their investment. So I don't know whether a newly elected politician is any better prospect than somebody who's been in office for 20 years. I think that there's been some talk in the leadership team about how to approach politicians at the national level. And many of us have said, perhaps one day, but now we don't have enough of a footprint in the country to be listened to or to be credible. Maybe we could talk with their staffers. Maybe we could invite their staffers to be members of workshops. But the office holders themselves, I don't know.
Okay, we have a question back here.
You talked about the challenges of doing the workshops in a deeply blue state. What has been your experience in doing them in deeply red states, and how is it different?
So is Texas red?
Oh, yeah.
Purple? I don't know. I've learned not to mess with Texas. So we just had 2 workshops in Texas. One workshop arose because a person said, boy, this is really horrible, the situation we're in. And he started to bring reds and blues together on his own and tried to find a way to work with them. And then he heard about Better Angels and our workshop model, which is pretty easy to administer. And so we had a workshop in McKinney, Texas, about a month ago. We had a workshop in Austin, Texas, last Saturday. In fact, on Saturday, we had 11 workshops throughout the United States. Over the weekend, we had 14 workshops throughout the United States. So I don't know from personal experience whether it's harder to do it in a red state or whether it's as hard for the same reason with the colors reversed in a red state. I kind of have the sense that blues are happy to take any opportunity to talk that they are given, and that reds might be a little more cautious in exposing themselves to being trapped into being badgered for 7 hours about how they ought to change their minds.
I don't understand what you're saying right there.
So that's okay. So the statement was that this person didn't understand what I was saying. So our experience with respect to reds, are you saying?
And blues too, but blues badger and reds don't.
No, I said that blues are happy to have any opportunity to share their views and positions generally. And my experience so far is that it's often more of a process to persuade reds that this workshop might be worthwhile and fulfilling to attend. And I think there's caution on the part of reds. They don't want to be trapped and subjected to attempts to change their points of view. Now, there's no science behind this. Well, fight with me afterwards. We can talk more about it.
Okay, we're going to take a question right here in a second. I just want to say there are a lot of students here and members of our Student Advisory Board. You guys can ask questions. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Let's go right here to this gentleman.
I was wondering about the capacity you see for this red-blue division to address issues of race. And a lot of times I think when we talk about going back to times where reds and blues could work together, we're going back to times, whatever word you want to use, but some form of a white supremacy, and where diversity in the Senate meant maybe Nancy Kassebaum had a small bathroom down the corridor. And I'm not sure if I'm interested in red-blue alliances if it means giving up changing demographics, giving up changing representation of women in government.
I don't think that these are mutually exclusive, and you're not the first person to bring this up. Some people feel that we have to consider the history of slavery and the effect of slavery over the past decades in order to arrive at an understanding of where we are as a country. I'm guessing you're such a person. So there are a lot of things that we can talk about. And a RedBlue workshop may address such issues if a participant brings them up in the context of the exercises. But we're not aiming at anything in particular other than doing the work that's before us. As a group of people who've decided to form a RedBlue alliance, that group decides what it wants to address. So an alliance has approximately equal numbers of reds and blues. They are led equally by a red and a blue, equal effort by both leaders. One person isn't doing all the work while the other's just hanging out and smoking cigars and waiting for the next thing to happen. We want people to actually work together, reds and blues together. We don't proceed on any course of action unless 75% of the reds and 75% of the blues agree that it's something that we want to do together. So that group can't be accused by anyone of being led by reds or led by blues. Now, whether you're going to get a group of people who want to address the question of racial injustice is another matter. However, when we look at the possibility of Better Angels debates, there's an environment where you might bring up the question resolved that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission should examine the history of slavery and the results of slavery to the present day. And you might get a group of people who are pro and con, and you might be able to have an energetic conversation about that. So we're not targeted towards any particular issue other than reducing depolarization. What people do as individuals and as alliances is up to them. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, we got a question here.
Hi, so I'm a member of the Dole Student Advisory Board, and much to my dismay, I'm not able to attend the Red versus Blue workshop tomorrow. However, I'd still love to continue to learn how I can better engage in oppositional discussion with others, particularly informal oppositional discussion with others. And I was just wondering if you had any recommendations maybe on books or blogs or media sources or talks that you think have been helpful in your experience in learning how to continue having better, healthier discussions with people who believe much differently than you.
So, well, that's a great question, isn't it? So I think a lot of the success we have or don't have depends on how we enter the conversation. And if we enter a conversation intent on persuading another that their point of view is wrong, we're likely not to have much success. But if you are genuinely curious, if we really wonder why a person has this point of view, you can ask them. And if you ask open-ended questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no, and you remain silent, they have to fill the air. They can't not talk and just stand there and look at you. They've got to say something. So ask a lot of questions and listen to the answers and ask more questions. And so that's one approach that'll help you pretty much everywhere. And when I forget to do that, I am reminded that it's a good idea to do that. Another thing is I'd recommend for reading Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. H-A-I-D-T, Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. Apparently, reds and blues do have different fundamental values, or more precisely, the weight they place on the importance of those values differs. So we are a little bit different, reds and blues. So it's a good idea to learn a little bit more about that. I'd say there are a lot of articles on our website. If you go to the Better Angels media section, there are podcasts and blog pieces. So you can learn more about what we're doing. And a lot of other people throughout the country are doing work to bring folks together. You've probably heard of Living Room Conversations. There's an organization that is named Make America Dinner Again. A bunch of people are doing this, and some folks are doing it informally in their neighborhoods and communities, unconnected to anything else, because they're feeling the pain of the conditions under which we live. I'd say now would be a great time to start thinking about training to be a debate chair and help bring this to school. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question here.
Thank you for your talk tonight. I really have enjoyed it. My question actually goes more to, as we look at our culture today, as we look at the way we curate information, as we look at information that can be sent out into the internet and go around the world in the blink of an eye, as we see reinforcement of particular views by a tweet and a retweet and a retweet, how do you address trust in your different venues? How do you, I think that's really fundamentally what I'm seeing, is that there's been a reinforcement of certain views and ideas through things that may not, I think our culture is having a trouble sometimes separating fiction and opinion and reporting, and how do you really get to that moment when a red or a blue are just not trusting what the other person is saying, and how do you resolve it?
Well, what do you tell a guy in a hole? Stop digging, right? Stop making it worse. So we have a social media pledge. And so I was such an offender. And even now I'm tempted to offend. So if you Google Better Angels social media pledge, if you're active on social media, this will make you a kinder, wiser, stronger, better, gentler person. and many people will be very grateful for that. So I don't think that there's anything that I, as an individual, can do about the environment you described, except decline to participate. I don't consume it, and I don't add to it. Until the Malden workshop came up, and I realized that we were going to have a problem if I didn't get annoying people on Facebook, I was off Facebook for a couple months. I found it too depressing. Enough already. I've gotten rid of cable TV. I don't need it. Thank you. I'm all set. So if you want to persuade people that your facts are actually the right facts, I think you're going to have trouble with that in this environment.
How do you deal with that? You know, I totally agree with you. I'm just trying to understand that when you're in that moment and people are genuinely trying to understand another point of view, and they're citing things that, you know, a red is citing things that a blue doesn't trust, or vice versa. Just how do you resolve that in the conversation? I'm not asking you to comment on social media. That's
so
a much
I don't
bigger,
have to fix society.
No.
It's a
no.
specific question that I totally missed.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough,
Well,
but I'm
I don't know
talking
the
about in
problems on
those
your end.
moments.
So in a workshop, I have not actually seen that happen a lot. And the workshop is designed so that we're not criticizing the other side. The stereotypes exercise, we're looking at what stereotypes we believe the other side has of us. So we're calling ourselves these names. And we're looking at the falsehood, what's true instead, and is there a kernel of truth? The thing in it that makes us cringe when somebody on our side behaves that way, that's what we're looking for. And in the fishbowl, we're talking about why our policies and values are good for the country, and what about our policies and values gives us pause. Again, we're looking for the cringeworthy stuff. In questions of curiosity, it's a direct question. We're looking for a direct answer. So I have not heard talking points that were clearly talking points and facts from this side or that side really come up in these workshops. So I think it's a question, or it's attributable to workshop design. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, we have a question right here.
I've been trying to think about what the end result is that you're looking for out of these, and you use the word polarization. Since the objective is not to change people's minds, does this make us, is the effort to simply make us more polite as we disagree?
Well, that wouldn't hurt, would it?
No, it'd be all right, but you know, it's kind of like, it would still be the Antifa guy with the chain and the lock on the end, and he'd only say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did that."
Did I
after he
injure
did it to
you?
Yeah, he'd be polite, you know.
So the goal is not to bring us closer to some center point where each side gives up some of its values. The goal is to enable folks on each side to learn what's driving the thinking and behavior of the folks on the other side. I had, so far as I know, no conservative friends in my circle of acquaintances. Well, as it turns out, when one of them said, well, I'll be the red organizer for a workshop, I'm thinking, well, I wonder how many times I said something, assuming everybody in our little group was liberal, that this person just kept her mouth shut about. So the goal is not to gloss over our differences with some superficial politeness. But I think that if we reintroduce civility in our public discourse, we then have the opportunity to contest ideas as opposed to berating people personally. So now we're talking about values and policies and ideas, and we're not insulting one another. So maybe we arrive at a more accurate understanding of our differences. So maybe we realize on these things, we're pretty much in the same place, but in this quarter or third of the issues before us, we're really different. So we accurately understand our differences, and the person who sits across from us is no longer the hated adversary. There's somebody who cares about our country, cares about our community, is a person with whom we've established a relationship and with whom we have differences of opinion. So how does that translate into action, I guess, is maybe the unasked part of your question. Where's the change going to come then if we're just kinder, gentler versions of ourselves? But, you know, if we ask Red-Blue Alliances to take a look at what's going on in their communities, and if there's something especially divisive in their community, maybe a group of Reds and Blues together can address that issue. Regardless of who's in power in that community, Reds and Blues together carry a lot more weight than a group of people from the side that's not in power saying, hey, this is a problem and we need to work on this. I don't think this is something that can happen overnight. I think that it's reasonable to think of this in terms of 5 to 10 years. If we think about how we've grown as an organization, when I started actively proselytizing for Better Angels back in November, nobody'd heard anything about them. And now people have heard. Many people have heard about Better Angels. So the word's getting out. We're getting a lot of press. People are doing this work. David Blankenhorn said in our last team meeting, imagine 11 workshops on Saturday. He said, I don't remember how long it took us to have 11 workshops in a row. And now we had 11 in one day. So the thing seems to be growing geometrically. I don't know how it's going to work to change the way we are with each other, but if everybody here tonight decides that they're going to stop digging the hole deeper and start talking with friends and business associates and neighbors, asking open-ended questions instead of assuming they know what the other person thinks already, you know, this change could come about pretty quickly. I think people are fed up with the way things are. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, right here.
That was a really great segue into my question, which is that you said the last session at the workshop is for participants to create an action plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, what sorts of things have you seen come out of that action plan? And have you seen any changes so far at this point?
I think, you know, we ask people to look at what can I do? what can I do with the people of my tribe, and what can I do with the people of both tribes? And we don't collect that information, we don't track it, we don't do anything with it. I think, I am not the designer, and I offered a recommended change to the workshop, and the response to that made it really clear that I wasn't the designer. I had no idea of what I was trying to fiddle with. So I think the intention is to get people to think about action steps they can take, whether it's individually or with the folks from the other side, together with their own group. We hope that they form a Red-Blue Alliance, and that Red-Blue Alliance decides to do something. So the first workshop I chaired was in East Hampton, Massachusetts, on March 10th of this year. And we had, I don't know, 6 Reds and 6 Blues come together and a whole bunch of observers. And as a result of that workshop, a Red-Blue Alliance formed. And it struggled a little bit to find its feet and figure out what it wants to do. But these folks kept coming to be with each other. They've developed relationships, and they are offering the Pioneer Valley a Red-Blue debate on October 22nd. So, you know, who knows what'll come of that action. I think that this is a grassroots effort. Individuals feel a need for change, and they decide to do something about it. The folks who think it's a good idea but don't have time in their life, or they think maybe this isn't the right way to do it, you know, still, if we're spreading the word, people are getting the idea that here's one solution or possible solution among, you know, maybe many possible solutions. So I think it gets us thinking in the right direction. Thank you.
I have time for one more question if I see a hand pop up. Okay, no hands. Rob, thank you so much for coming out. We
Could
really
I say
appreciate it.
something? So I want to say how delighted I am that Better Angels was invited here, and how grateful I am to be the person here representing Better Angels. I'm so grateful to Senator Riley for funding, endowing this effort. I have to say the folks at the Dole Institute have been amazing to deal with. It really has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed my visit here so much. I hope that you find a reason to get involved in this kind of work, whether it's through Better Angels or some other way. I hope that your coming here tonight is part of your process in getting involved in doing this. I think we've got a lot of work to do. I hope that it offers you the same hope that it has offered me. Thank you so much.
Rob, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out, and take this seriously. This is very, very informative, and I think Better Angels is doing great work. So thank you all for joining us tonight.